Picture a February night deep in the Ural Mountains, 40 degrees below zero. The wind screams across a slope the local people called, in their own language, the Mountain of the Dead. And in the middle of that darkness, 9 young people come sprinting out of their tent, barefoot, in their underwear, running straight towards certain death. Not one of them ever came back, and what the rescuers found weeks later has fueled more than 60 years of theories, fear, and obsession. This is what we know and what no one can fully explain. January 1959, the Soviet Union. Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old radio engineering student from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, gathers a group of 9 others, most of them classmates from the university. They're experienced mountaineers, not weekend tourists. The goal, to reach Mount Otorten in the northern Urals, a brutal route. At that time of year, a trek like this was rated Category 3, the most dangerous, with temperatures dropping to 30 below zero. The group travels by train, then by truck, toward the last inhabited villages. On January 26th, they take a truck to Vijay, the final settlement to the north, and the next day, the 27th, they begin their march toward Mount Otorten. And here a small detail enters the story, one that would decide who lived and who died. On January 28th, one member, Yuri Yudin, who suffered from several health problems, turned back because of knee and joint pain that kept him from continuing. Yudin said goodbye to his friends. It was the last time he ever saw them alive. Without knowing it, that ailment saved his life. 9 remained. On February 1st, the group pushes on toward the pass. The weather worsens. According to the expedition's records, they set up their final camp on February 1st, 1959, on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, a mountain whose name translates ironically as Dead Mountain or Mountain of the Dead. They pitched the tent on an open slope. They cut into the snow to level the ground. They had dinner. And then, silence. No one ever heard from them again. Days passed. The group was supposed to send a telegram when they returned. They'd planned to message their sports club about 3 weeks after setting out. So when the club heard nothing by around February 20th, a search team went out to look for them. What they found made no sense. On February 26th, they discovered the group's tent, badly damaged, on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl. It was half buried in the snow. But the truly unsettling part was something else. The tent had been opened with a cut, and as a seamstress later observed, someone had made that cut from the inside. The hikers hadn't left through the door. They had slashed their own tent with a knife to escape. And why is that so strange? Because inside they left almost everything behind. Their belongings were relatively untouched. The team found the boots, the clothing, and the gear carefully arranged, and food on a plate as if they were about to eat. In other words, something drove them to bolt, all at once, in the dead of night with no coats and no shoes, into a cold that kills. The footprints told the story. 8 or 9 sets of tracks were found, many of them clearly made by people with nothing, in socks, or with a single shoe on their feet. They walked. They didn't scatter in a stampede. They walked in a line down the slope toward the forest, more than a kilometer away. There they found the first of them. The first 2 bodies belonged to students Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonischenko. Several hundred meters from the tent, lying in their underwear beside the remains of a fire, next to a cedar tree. They had tried to light a fire. They had tried to survive. One by one, more appeared. 3 more were found dead days later, including Igor Dyatlov himself. The last 4 bodies were discovered in spring, when the snow melted. And it was those final 4 bodies that turned a mountain tragedy into one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. 2 of them had fractured skulls, 2 more had severe chest fractures, and one of the hikers was missing her tongue. Brutal injuries. The kind that, according to the investigators of the time, require enormous force. But, and this is key, with almost no visible external wounds. The Soviet report was as brief as it was baffling. Soviet investigators recorded the cause of death as an unknown compelling force, and abruptly closed the case barely a month later. An unknown compelling force. What does that even mean? The state never explained, and silence always feeds suspicion. Citing the absence of a guilty party, the investigation was closed in May 1959, and the files were sealed and classified. When they finally became accessible in the 1990s, parts of them were missing. And then there was the radiation. Perhaps the most baffling detail of all, some of the hikers' clothing was found to contain significant levels of radiation. With ingredients like these, the theories exploded, and this is where it pays to separate fact from myth. People blamed everything. Their deaths have been attributed to infrasound-induced panic, to animals, to attacks by yetis or local tribes, to katabatic winds, to an avalanche, to a romantic dispute, to secret KGB or CIA operations, to ballistic rockets or nuclear weapons tests. Yetis, aliens, secret weapons. Each one more spectacular than the last. But let's turn to the sensible explanations. That mysterious radiation may have an earthly answer. 2 years earlier, there had been a nuclear accident known as the Kishtim disaster. One of the hikers had lived in the contaminated zone, and another had helped with the cleanup. And the darkened skin on the bodies, which some cited as proof of something paranormal. The discoloration of skin and hair can be explained by a natural mummification process after 3 months of exposure to cold and wind. And the supposed government cover-up, concealing information about internal incidents, was standard procedure in the USSR, and therefore nothing unusual. One by one, the impossible details start to have ordinary explanations. But the biggest question remained, what made them flee the tent? For decades, the avalanche theory was rejected, and for good reasons. In 2019, the Russian government did something unusual. It reopened the case. The investigation concluded in 2020 that an avalanche had likely forced the survivors to suddenly abandon their camp in low visibility, wearing inadequate clothing before eventually dying of hypothermia. But many weren't convinced, because the evidence seemed to contradict a classic avalanche. And here comes the twist in this story. In 2021, 2 Swiss scientists published a study in the journal Communications, Earth and Environment. They laid out the 4 arguments that had always sunk the avalanche theory. A slope with a shallower angle than usual, the lack of avalanche signs, the uncertainty about what would have triggered it, and the anomalous injuries of the victims. And then they proposed a new mechanism, a slab avalanche, a physical process caused by the gradual buildup of wind-blown snow on the slope above the tent, a combination of irregular terrain, the cut made into the slope to pitch the tent, and the later deposit of snow by strong katabatic winds that after a time caused the slab to break loose. In other words, by cutting the snow to level the ground, the hikers unknowingly weakened the slope. Hours later, in the dead of night, a slab of compacted snow broke free and crashed down onto the tent. Using computer simulations, they showed that the impact of a snow slab can cause injuries just like the ones observed. A hard slab of snow, crushing sleeping people inside their bags, can fracture ribs and skulls while leaving almost no external marks. It fits, and why did there seem to be no avalanche on the slope? Because the terrain deceives. An expedition revealed that the ground is covered in natural steps, on the scale of meters, that could produce a slab avalanche, even though the overall slope looks deceptively safe beneath the snow. So the most plausible reconstruction would be this. The slab breaks loose, badly injuring several members, and the group, terrified, cuts open the tent and heads down to the forest, fearing a bigger avalanche. There, in the dark at 30 below zero, without coats, hypothermia did the rest. And there's still one chilling, deeply human detail. The prosecutor who led the Russian investigation described the group's final moments not as chaos, but as something very different. It was a heroic struggle. There was no panic, he said. They helped one another to the very end. But let's be honest, as this channel demands. Even this theory doesn't explain everything. It doesn't account for every detail, like why one hiker was missing her tongue, though a possible explanation is that hungry wildlife reached her body. And even with this new study, the case may never be fully closed. And maybe that's exactly why the story still fascinates us. Because deep down, as one of the researchers put it, people don't like it being an avalanche. It feels too ordinary. 9 young people set out for the mountains looking for adventure. They never came back. Science now offers us the most solid answer we've had in more than 60 years. But the slope of the Mountain of the Dead still keeps its final silence, and those 9, in their cemetery in Yekaterinburg, remain the only ones who ever knew the full truth of that night.